There are myths about refugees and migrants, and refugees often being termed as economic migrants.
Yes, and especially what I see in Thailand is that economic migrants and refugees is people mix up all the time and they don't really understand what this means.
Right.
So like for refugee, they think that it's the same as the illegal immigrants or the same as migrant workers, but actually it's totally different, right?
Absolutely. I mean, in a sense, one of the biggest differences between a migrant, an economic migrant, and a refugee is the fact that a migrant has the ability to go back home in the sense that he has made a decision to come here for economic reasons and has family back home and therefore can go back. A refugee is escaping persecution. He's leaving his family, his home, because he's being forced to because of various reasons of persecution, and there are valid reasons for which. So that is the fundamental distinction between that of a refugee and that of an economic migrant. And I think that is something that very often people misplace and misconstrue, in a sense, the difference between an economic migrant and that of a refugee. And that's precisely where we, as activists for refugee rights, will have to bring in the assumption, the fact that the convention, the 1951 convention, relates to these people who are being persecuted. And being on that subject, there is often the confusion that very often the states come out with, the fact that Thailand, Malaysia are not signatories to the 1950 convention, and therefore they do not have any responsibilities towards refugees.
Yeah, but at least, I mean, if any state that they do not sign this convention, I mean the 1951 convention, it doesn't mean that they don't have obligation
Right.
at all. But at least, for example, Thailand, they signed the ICCPR. And if we think about the international customary law like non-refoulement, at least, the Thai government have to respect this, customary law.
Exactly. I mean, this is customary law which every decent nation, every nation that is part, which is signed up to the UDHR, essentially will have to accept. And this is humanitarianism, basically. Would you throw somebody out of your house who has come to your house asking for refuge from being persecuted? Would you do that? And this relates to a nation, a civilized nation, and we're talking civilized nations here. But there's also the other argument very often said that if you allow and if you give decent conditions and if you give the rights of refugee rights to refugees, then that's going to open this floodgate and you have millions of people coming in, and that's going to be a pull factor. Do you see that?
It's like, I think it seems to be like a popular argument for any state that, oh, okay, if we give more protection to refugee, the pull factor, most refugee will come. But if we look in the fact, they're already there.
Right.
Like 100,000 of them already there in the country, in Thailand, in Malaysia.
Right.
So, it doesn't mean that if we give them more protection.
That is very interesting that you're saying that, because both Malaysia and Thailand have some of the worst records in terms of, the conditions in which refugees are. And yet there are so many people, high numbers of refugees in both of these countries. So the correlation between good conditions and refugees coming in has got nothing to do, it's not a pull factor in any way. People are escaping. I mean, that's the point. They're escaping persecution. Most of the refugees in Thailand and Malaysia are from Burma, which is a neighbor. And naturally, people are fleeing persecution. They will go to the nearest place they can go to. But having said that, when we say that we need to provide, refugee rights to the rights of decent existence to refugees, we are talking in terms of providing humanitarian assistance, humanitarian basic baselines to refugees, and that also helps states to be able to streamline and make sure that the system is not abused to a certain extent, where, as I say, the economic migrants who come in as refugees. So in a sense, you could make a distinction where people who are really in need of protection can be given protection, and avoid from others not being given that. So you need to really streamline that, and this is precisely one of the arguments that we are trying to make. Isn't that?
Yes, I totally agree that state should have at least their own mechanism or domestic mechanism to taking care of the refugee in their own country. Otherwise, there will be the Westerner will come and condemn your country not to treat these people good enough.
And for me, it's a bit amazing that hospitality is traditional for many Asian societies, and it is rather strange that we have a different set of standards for people who come and seek refuge in our own place. So therefore, we have to make ourselves accountable. We have to see whether we are human beings and ourselves and able to extend that humanitarianism to them. And that's precisely what we're trying to make, and make our governments accountable to that. And I think we should make this movement of refugee rights something that extends to where responsibility and ownership is taken by locals in a sense, and Malaysians questioning their own governments, Thais questioning their own governments, Indians questioning their own governments and making a difference. And that is what makes us more human. That's what makes us alive.